The slogan for Whyalla always used to be, where the outback meets the sea.
You've got the salt bush left and right. And all of a sudden you see in the distance some smokestacks. And you think, that's rather strange, it's all these smokestacks in the middle of nowhere. And you get a bit closer again and you come up against the steelworks.
A steel plant that looked like it was born in a Charles Dickens novel, set in England in the 1850s.
But because I know what's actually going on in those big sheds, I know it's the heart and the soul of our town. It's the lifeline. It's in our blood, it's our heartbeat. If the steelworks closed, there would be no Whyalla. There is no other industry in this town that hires that many people.
We're a one-company town. If the steelworks sneezes, Whyalla catches a cold. And 2 years ago, the steelworks got a coronary.
When Mr. Gupta arrived here, I think the business community in Australia thought this is a man who's arrived from another planet.
For me, I found what I regard as a diamond in the rough. I would say that Whyalla is a town that saved itself.
Whyalla is Australia's newest integrated steelworks. The plant uses the world's most modern technique of steelmaking, known as the basic oxygen steel process.
At the time of World War II, the government built a blast furnace in Whyalla and then decided they would build ships here. And after the war, the blast furnace was expanded to a fully functional steelworks.
And the resulting scream is symbolic of the jet age of steelmaking.
The steelworks spurned. If you go to an office block or a huge car park or something, that's Whyalla steel usually. And rail tracks.
Where once only the wallaby roamed the saltbush plain, families, thousands of them, now call this place home.
She'll give you some carrots and cheese.
Yeah. So what did you say that your grandpa used to do out at the company, Mum?
He got his apprenticeship as a fitter and turner, and both his brothers did their apprenticeship with the company as well.
Steel is definitely in my blood. My great-grandfather worked for the company at the shipyards.
All right, I'm off. Going to work.
All right, do you want me to put some food in a container for you, for crib? My father works for the company, and I even met my partner Dylan at the steelworks.
All right, see you all later.
He saw me across the floor of the blast furnace and sparks flew, I don't know. I actually started as a secretary and my boss came to me and said, you know, you're too smart to just be a secretary. I think you should go for one of these cadetships, you know, and study engineering. So I graduated with a degree of metallurgical engineering with honours.
What I think is the bearings collapsed and it's built up.
So I've been rocking a hard hat and the high vis for 10 years. So every day I put on that uniform with a sense of pride that I'm going to go to work and I'm going to make steel for Australia. You know, it's amazing. If you think about it like that, it's amazing, yeah. What's the update, Phil? When are we going to start charging, mate?
About 12 o'clock.
Yep.
Should be up temperature around about midday. And...
I got the sense that things weren't going so well with the company in early 2016. We had another round of redundancies and it was savage. And we're all sort of looking at each other going, what's going on?
6 months into the financial new year, and Arium continues to struggle with low steel and commodity prices.
The company that ran the Whyalla Steelworks was called Arium, and it was getting into trouble because the world was moving on from commodity steel to premium products, to specialised steel, but Arium was tied in to a business model that was being superseded.
They essentially made a whole shift of people redundant. And on the fence of the car park, they'd all hung their helmets up on the fence as a goodbye. I saw that and In my heart, I felt so upset for those people who have just lost their livelihood because of the state that the company was in.
I work with 50 different guys, I know all their names, because you spend so long working with them, they're your second family. Whyalla's one of those communities where if somebody's damaged, they band together. Everyone's involved with sport. You've got your churches here, there's Rotary clubs. It's a very tight-knit community. 121.7, 77.3, 3.3. The steelworks has always been a fairly solid rock. See ya. It started out with a little bit of pressure from management coming to us and saying, we need to cut costs. Yeah, can you check that the thermocouples are plugged into the ton dish, please? Basically, the ultimatum was that we were losing too much money, and if we can't stop that hemorrhage, that we were facing closure. Everybody was doing their best, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, overnight, we were in administration.
Arium management announced this morning the company was going into receivership, saying all other options had been exhausted.
And it was kind of, you know, is this real? Are you serious? Like, can that happen? You know, a big company as ours, are we in voluntary administration?
It's not one of those things you want to come home and say to your wife, hey, how was your day? Good. By the way, our property value has just diminished within a heartbeat and I might not have a job anymore. What's for tea?
I was one of the 4 administrators of the Arium Group. My personal reaction to looking at the books and records with my team was one, well, gee, you know, this business is very challenged. There was a high probability that the previous management prior to the administrators were looking to close Whyalla. So this was as scary as it gets when it comes to, you know, an administration process. The Arium administration is probably the most complex administration Court of Mint has ever done and probably the most complex in terms of Australian corporate history. 6,000 employees, $4 billion of debt, a business that had 70% of the Australian structural steel market could disappear overnight. But when you look into the eyes of the employees, that's where you see the vulnerability and the fear.
We need to grab some tiny teddies. Yeah, are you going to grab them for Mum?
2 weeks after the administration was announced, I found out I was pregnant. If we knew that the company was going to go into administration, we definitely would not have made the decision to have another baby at that time. I was very worried that I was going to lose my job.
Yeah, it's a papa.
Our worst fear was that the plant was going to shut down. That would be the end of the town. It'd be the end of life as I know it.
Jared, you need to open up your ears and listen.
We didn't want to leave Whyalla. This is our home, and this is where our family and friends are, and our house is. We didn't want to leave, and it was going to come to that.
Make sure we're looking at that ball before we pick it up. Righto, keep.
Head up.
Good.
My worst fear was that I was going to have to chase work in possibly another state and not be a part of the family, and the family was going to be stuck in a community, in a city where I'm not even sure whether the schools were still going to run.
You guys going to wear yourselves out?
There was the possibility of, a mass exodus.
Lead out, Iggy, lead out.
If the steelworks had shut, I would have been left with a block of dirt that I couldn't pay for with a house on it. Unless I found gainful employment somewhere else, I wasn't going to be able to pay the bank back. And the bank, I guarantee the bank didn't want my property because they would have had 30,000 others as well.
People in town just stopped buying things. And then, of course, you get that ripple effect through the whole community. The housing market crashed. People couldn't leave because they couldn't sell their houses. You know, businesses went broke, and it was just massively horrible for the whole town.
Whyalla is fast becoming Mark Menther's home away from home.
Well, I'm a country boy, and, you know, when I walk into a town like Whyalla, you know, it just resonates with country values. You know, it has 6 football teams and 6 soccer teams and 6 schools and 6 pubs, and it became very obvious that this town, this great community of Whyalla, wanted to save itself. Save our steel! Save our steel! Everyone had to play their part. The first people we went to were the contractors. We looked at government and what they could do. We then went to the employees. So we were trying to stabilise the business in a spectrum that would allow it to continue as a profitable going concern.
So we did the rip around across all 4 shifts to come up with some cost-saving initiatives. And they approached everybody from the coalface to the top of the ladder to get some ideas on anything we could do to reduce the cost of making steel, to try and get close to making a profit, to make it a saleable company.
There's money to be saved from reducing the amount of mode changes we do every time.
I'm also a delegate for the Australian Workers Union. I was in a position where, like, I can throw my hands in the air and sulk and wait for the outcome, or I can throw myself at it with everything I got and contribute wherever I can, which is what I chose to do.
That's fine, we'll save all of that money. We are going to take $20 million from wages.
We put a 10% wage reduction to the employees, set against the backdrop of where their house prices have halved. The reaction was incredibly hostile.
If I've got 10% less money in my pocket at the end of the week, I'm not going to go and buy coffees at the coffee shop. Or
They were bloody, they were personal, they were emotional, and they were probably one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do.
And you'd have guys standing up at the meetings going, you know, you can take your pay cut and stick it up your ass.
You said to the guys on the shop floor, you should not be penalised for sins of management. Now you're coming 12% wage cuts. Big roundabout turn, isn't it?
And it came round to a vote, and the pay cut got voted down.
And I've got to say, I was devastated. It's a real difficulty for us to sell the business with an expired enterprise agreement. So while we're negotiating, South Australia had a catastrophic weather event. The lights went out, the phones went down, and all hell broke loose.
For the first time in the history of the national energy market, an entire state was plunged into darkness.
It was like the apocalypse. There was no noise, no hum, and I was driving through thinking, this is what it's going to be like if we close down. This is it. This is what the plant's going to be like.
We had a pipeline, which is really the artery of the business, which is the slurry that comes from the iron ore mine to the pellet plant that feeds the blast furnace. It has the consistency of a toothpaste. If that solidified, the blood stops flowing to the blast furnace. And it only needed about another 6 hours, and we would have had to relay 60 miles of pipeline at a cost which basically would have meant we would have closed that operation the next day. That's how close it got to closing Whyalla and those iron ore mines.
Got your 12-metre mark, 8 and 12. There to the first roll under the bed.
And I think that may have contributed a little bit as far as being a wake-up call to, hey, how serious the situation is, how dire it is. And, yeah, we went to another vote.
So the fundamental message was you have to do this to save yourself.
So reluctantly I voted yes, knowing that it was going to be the only way that we were going to get through. The second time round it got voted up, and we basically agreed to a 10% pay cut.
Oh, shit. Oh, no.
My dad was against the pay cuts and he would have voted no, but Mum said that he decided to vote yes because he wanted me to have a future. And because I had the understanding of why it had to happen, I supported the pay cut.
There was 400 management that also went in and gave, a pay reduction. There was contractors, suppliers, so everyone contributed. So the cost-saving initiatives, was put into an information memorandum that was sent out globally to over 70 prospective buyers.
When REM got into trouble and we saw that it was up for sale, I saw that as a very exciting opportunity. So Australia has always been very puzzling for me. It's a country which is blessed with every natural resource you can think of, but yet it produces nothing. It exports all its raw materials. And nothing more stark, as an example, than steel.
I would leave the airport about 7:30 the latest.
We looked at the buyers and culled them down ultimately to two. So on the one hand, we had the GFG group with Sanjeev Gupta as its executive chairman. And on the other hand, we had a private equity POSCO consortium from South Korea.
No one had ever heard of Sunjeev Gupta before this, but then why would we? He's a mystery man, really.
Everybody, Google Sanjeev Gupta. Well, what's he done? What's he worth? How's he going to do this?
And that's when I sort of read up on Sanjeev and, I found out he was a pretty amazing guy and he had a real vision for steel making.
Welcome everybody to Liberty Steel Newport. It's a proud day for us today as we start production. Please let me show you around.
The name Sanjeev Gupta was most prominently associated with the intervention in Newport, in the steel plant there, which, like Whyalla, was on its knees. Along came this extraordinary entrepreneur who told them there is a future in the Welsh steel industry.
There was not a single meeting I wouldn't walk into. People would look at me, asking me, literally, are you crazy? Why would you buy a steel industry in Britain that was completely, it was regarded to be completely nuts.
He hasn't made any of us redundant, and throughout the country, wherever he's bought anything, nobody's been made redundant.
But he invested. What has happened there is an unalloyed success. Is that entirely due to the vision of one man? Well, in this case, I think you've got to say, to a large extent, it is.
I must also pay a particular tribute to Sanjeev Gupta. Sanjeev is doing so much to apply real imagination, innovative thinking, and sustainable rejuvenation to our nation's heavy industries.
Sanjeev, in many ways, is a fantastic story for journalists. He's got a great backstory. He's developed a business in a very short space of time, buying fantastic assets in the UK, certainly very big assets and totemic assets.
I was born in Punjab, in the northwest part of India. It's a business family for generations. So when I was growing up, steel and bicycles were the two businesses the family was in mainly. Then when I was in, I think, the sort of end of 9th grade, I moved to the UK. I'm just starting university. I decided then to form my own company. That's when I formed Liberty. And actually, it came to a point where I registered all my telephones, fax machines, telex machines at the university address. And then the university found out. I didn't know you're not supposed to run a business out of there. So I got deaned, as they say, which is like sort of when you called in, when you're being naughty. I had to go and get an apartment nearby, and it just grew and grew and grew from there. We're about $3 billion net assets, 30-odd countries where we have operations.
So there was a bit of excitement about Sanjeev bidding for our steelworks.
My personal feeling was I was hoping that it was going to be him, just given his track record.
The clincher was when I went to Whyalla. What I didn't know was that this hidden gem was sitting there. Everything was there. It has amazing infrastructure. The port which has been built, the airport, the town, the housing, everything has been built to be a much bigger steel plant. And yet, it was a complete failure. It was supposed to be shut. Nobody was talking about how do we make this work, can it work? It was a foregone conclusion that they can't work.
You bring the seal down, so you've got to create the seal, then you create the vacuum.
He asked if he could meet up with some union organisers, and I was lucky enough to be one of the guys that was there for that meeting.
Natasha's just started with the company, and her father is also working here.
I was particularly moved by the fact that the workers had taken a pay cut, voluntarily. It was an amazing sacrifice and showed the desire of this community and these people that they weren't going to let this go.
Mesmerizing. It is, isn't it? You can almost hypnotic. Yeah.
And that gave me a lot of confidence that if I bought this business, I would have a great force behind me to turn around.
Whyalla's Steelworks officially has a new owner. British billionaire Sanjeev Gupta is promising more than $1 billion of investment in the business.
You could almost hear the great sigh of relief going through Whyalla. Someone's bought the place. You know, it's not going to close. It's actually got a future.
I was ecstatic. It was so exciting. It was a weight off my shoulders.
For the first 100 days, as you may be aware, I have taken the helm myself, so I will be CEO of this business for those 100 days.
It was a landmark day for Whyalla, and I came out and marched on the streets as a sign of saying thank you. You know, it was probably one of the most satisfying days in my working career.
There was Mr. Gupta in the middle of it, with his whole family, the wife and the kids. We thought maybe we should rename the town Guptaville, because he's saved the steelworks. He's saved all the jobs in Whyalla.
They saw death very close, right? They came very, very close to extinction.
This is the spirit of Whyalla, which allowed this town and these steelworks to survive the dark days.
I was definitely being adopted by Whyalla, there's no question about that. When I bought that business, the town adopted me. It became my town.
Coming close. Sanjeev Gupta. He keeps getting described as the saviour of Whyalla, saviour of our city. But you know, it actually is an apt description to give to him.
I don't like or want titles like saviour and so on. They saved themselves because they wouldn't have been there. If they hadn't been their persistence and their unwillingness to give up, they probably would have shut.
They knew, and they know today, by going through that process, they actually saved the steelworks and the iron ore mines, and probably Whyalla in the process.
If there are other towns that are in a similar situation as we were, then I think it's definitely something they have to think about.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Sanjeev, he saw the enormity of the task he had ahead of him here in Australia, so he moved his family to Australia and is running his global operations from here. And, you know, it's pretty unique in a global entrepreneur.
This is my home in Sydney. Yesterday we completed our first anniversary in Australia. So today we're celebrating that with all our staff and all their children, actually.
No, both legs together like kangaroo. Okay.
Oh, it was a huge surprise to learn that we're moving to Sydney. We went out on a 4-week holiday and he said, I don't think we should go back. And I said, yeah, are you crazy? How the hell do you expect me to, you know, move a whole family?
The business which we bought is spread across the whole country, all of Australia. And Sydney, of course, is the head office. And me traveling around the country to all the locations, but mainly, of course, focused on Whyalla. It is, for me, my spiritual home and the spiritual home of steel in Australia. We have multiple plans in Whyalla. We will go from 1 million tons to 2 million tons in terms of steel production. But it won't just be about adding capacity, it's also about upgrading the plant, making much higher value-added steel.
Good to see 5 strands, man. It's always a happy day when we got 5 strands.
The part 2 is then to launch a new steel plant, you know, a world-scale steel plant, maybe a 10 million ton steel plant. And it would be the first major investment Australia has seen for decades in industry. It's a huge, huge legacy, and it would put Australia on the map in terms of steel. 1, 2, 3,
go! The British billionaire who stepped in to save the Whyalla Steelworks has announced a $1 billion cash splash on renewable energy projects in the local region.
One of the missing things is energy. Energy is expensive. We need to fix that. We are fixing that.
Some 800,000 solar panels will be installed across 1,100 hectares.
He wants to take us to the next generation of steel making using renewable energy to power his steel plants. And that's essentially solar, wind and hydro.
So together, that gives us the ability to offer dispatchable baseload power at prices cheaper than other forms of power. That is our strong conviction.
Do you want 1 corn or 2 corners?
I want 2 corners. There's definitely plenty of cynics still through the town. And even myself, there's this little voice in the back of my head saying, but what if it's all just talk, you know? What if it's all just a pipe dream and tomorrow, you know, there's all of a sudden no funding and then we're in the same turmoil again.
We'll ship these slabs to the UK? Yep.
Well, everything Mr. Gupta does involves some inherent risk. I don't think it's really possible with a private company to know everything about the internal financial arrangements.
When you bought the business in September, that's
when the portrait went up.
If there is a serious downturn in global trade, I think all bets would be off for Mr. Gupta, but then all bets are off for all of us.
I have not been able to reconcile how he can make all this work. He is stepping into the shoes of really big established players. They have tried and tried and tried again and still haven't been able to make it work. I question why somebody else who, without that pedigree, without that history, can make a success of it.
My feelings about the future of Whyalla have definitely changed. I am excited for the future. I can't wait to see what Sanjeev's got on the plan next. There's definitely an expectation that Sanjeev is going to contribute to the community. This is the Whyalla Dirt Circuit Car Club, and we love coming here because there's such a good family atmosphere. My partner Dylan is one of the drivers. A lot of the guys from the Steelworks are a part of the Dirt Circuit Club. Just this morning, two of the guys that were here had actually just finished night shift. I always joke that I've got two little steel makers and that one day they'll probably work at the Steelworks too. You see Daddy over there, look.
There's been a lot of damage done, obviously, and a lot of people left town, a lot of businesses closed. Everybody knows that it's not going to be an overnight change, but it's certainly a lot better feeling.
Whyalla has been given a second chance. You know, it needs to make the most of that second chance to continue as a vibrant community, and they can't rest on their laurels and just go, I'm glad that's behind us, because the challenge is still ahead of them.
Hi, Sanjeev. Nice to meet you, mate.
One of our team leaders.
Nice to meet you.
I was really excited to meet Sanjeev and, given the opportunity, I was so nervous. Sanjeev, can I please get a photo because you're my hero and I want to put it on my Facebook and everybody will jealous.
I'm sure we will have success. We have success already. We're already making money in our plants. There are great promises ahead. Now, how much of that promise can we actually actualize? That is an unknown.
And I mean, there will be enough opportunities in Whyalla.
Yeah, maybe they'll go into fabrication, into something else, in the verge of the world.
When things are going well, for me, it just eggs me on to the next one. Enjoyment for me is finding the next thing to do and the next challenge and the next progress to make. So what I'm trying to say is that I will never stop in Whyalla. I will move on in the sense that I will leave Australia, I will move on to another country. 1st of September next year is when I will leave. That's the target. But our business will continue, and it will continue to grow from strength to strength. So Whyalla will continue to grow in its own way forever.